Hello, my name is Justin McLew, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today, we're doing two directors for a very specific reason. We're going to be talking about Fred Olen Ray and Jim Wynorski. And if you're like, well, who are these guys? If you're over 25, it's a guarantee you've seen their movies on the video store shelves.
And you've probably seen them late night TV, like Cinemax, Showtime.
If you're in the States, USA, Up All Night, they would play their movies all the time.
The Sci-Fi Channel, the Space Channel here.
Just a few titles. Return of Swamp Thing, Deathstalker 2, Chopping Mall, Evil Tunes.
The Witches of Breastwick. Dino Croc versus Super Gator.
Fred Olen Ray's most famous picture, Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers.
Yep.
So I was aware of them for a long time. And for a long time, I didn't like their movies at all. I just dismissed them instantly. I was like, Fred Olen Ray, get it away from me! Because if you've seen any of their famous films, specifically Evil Tunes, which if you were a teenager, you remember as the one cover that was a woman with large breasts and a cartoon dog demon over her shoulder.
And in fact, I saw the trailer for it before I saw the movie, which really hyped up the one scene that had an animated cartoon in it.
Like, it promises you're going to see an adult version of Who Framed Roger Rabbit in a horror movie setting. And you're like, oh boy! And it's really just girls in a haunted house-like situation. And at one point, a cartoon comes out of a book.
It should be called Evil Tune.
Yes, it should. But supposedly it was a huge hit, and that's really all that mattered.
Of course it was a hit. People just rented it once.
Yeah, exactly.
And didn't finish it.
I don't know how we're going to go about this and talk about Fred Olen Ray and Jim Wynorski at the same time.
Well, first of all, I think this is going to be the Justin DeCoteau show because, you really took to this like a pig in shit. I mean... every time I checked Letterboxd this week, it was just one awful movie with a 1.5 star grade after another. I watched 3 films by each auteur, which...
That's a lot of work.
Already
That's 6 movies.
Almost killed me.
Well, we watched 2 of them together.
That's right.
We watched Beverly Hills Vamp and...
Hard to Die.
Hard to Die.
And then on my own, I watched Chopping Mall and Return of Swamp Thing by Jim Wynorski. And I watched Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers
Scalps.
and Scalps by Fred Olen Ray.
We should go all the way back to the beginning with Fred Olen Ray. Yeah. So Fred Olen Ray is an independent guy. That's how he's pretty much always been, and that's how he started. The first film he made was a little piece of shit, and he'll say that himself, called The Brain Leeches, that he made with the equipment that he had at his TV station, that he used the cameras that he had at hand to shoot this film that, according to him, he projected once and never released anywhere. But his second film, The Alien Dead, is the one that kind of gave him a name. It's a film that for a long time you could find on a million bootleg VHS tapes. And that was one that he shot on film. He did it himself. He started a technique that he would use in all his future films, which is you would cast an old, washed-up actor, in this case, Buster Crabbe, from the old Flash Gordon serials.
That's an old fucking actor.
Fred Olen Ray said he met him while making a special on the Senior Olympics. And that's how you sell the picture. And The Alien Dead, Fred Olen Ray hates the movie. He dismisses it instantly. I actually kind of like it because of the fact that it is shot off the cuff and it has this 16mm grainy look. He'll be the first one to say that he didn't really know what he was doing. So what happened was that they had no sync sound, and what they would do is he had all the actors record their dialogue beforehand, and then he would play it on set, and they would have to try to match their lips to the dialogue that they pre-recorded.
That's funny.
It's not that hot a movie, and that's something I'll be repeating a lot in this podcast. But the second film that we'll watch as well that he made after was Scalps. And so after Fred Olen Ray made Alien Dead, he decided he was going to make his move to Hollywood. He had no money in his pocket, but he had to take a shot at it because he loved movies so much. And that's something important about both Jim Wynorski and Fred Olen Ray. And the reason that we're really talking about them today is that they are huge movie buffs. Mm-hmm. Like, you've read interviews or listened to commentaries, and that is instantly recognizable.
So I watched Scalps, which was shot on 16mm, but looks like it was shot on 8mm.
Yes, it does.
Anything.
Super 8.
I was briefly excited to see that Forrest J. Ackerman, the former editor of Famous Monsters of Filmland, was in it, but he's only in it for about 30 seconds. seconds. Most of the movie, you compared it to Evil Dead. It's a group of college students who go out into the wilderness. It looks like some barren canyon type area.
Yeah, it's probably the Bronson Canyon where they shot like all the Star Trek episodes.
Yeah, and Robot Monster.
Yep.
But they go to a place that is an Aboriginal burial ground, and one of them gets possessed by an Aboriginal demon, and some scalping takes place. This is a movie that, it definitely has kind of like the look and the texture of the sort of movie I would like. Because it has that really low-budget vibe. The distributor added music to the movie after, so it has this... I saw a lot of
It's called Murder Drone, where it's like, it's a droning sound. Well, the distributor also took the movie out of Fred Olen Ray's hands and edited gore and monster shots throughout the picture when characters are just walking around. So what you get is almost like an eraser head, like, what?
Right.
Why are you cutting to a man in a lion mask?
So it has this kind of idiot savant dreamy quality to it.
Yep.
This unintentional dreamy quality, but I have to say I was pretty bored by it.
You know, I think that Justin DeCoteau 7 years ago when he saw Scalps for the first time would also say that.
But now that you're at the cosmic brain stage.
That's right.
Yeah.
Where I was just totally into it. And it probably comes from the fact that I've listened to a lot of Fred Olen Ray commentary tracks at this point, and the one for Scalps is an all-timer. He talks about how he was trying to create a claustrophobic sense in the desert, where, like, these characters are trapped in this large expanse. Does he succeed? No, not really. But I think that I can see that attempt there. And it's the rare Fred Olen Ray film that at the end pays off with something. In this case, kids being killed. Like, we actually see some special effects, which would not be the case in most of his future pictures.
All right, you're right. It's a masterpiece.
3 stars out of 5.
But it's not what I would think of in my limited experience with him as, like, a quintessential Fred Olen Ray movie.
Absolutely not.
The style that I associate with Fred Olen Ray is a lot of model types with big breasts in one location, some shitty house in the Hollywood Hills or something, and they're running around being chased by a ghoul.
So we have to clarify right here that Fred Olen Ray, I said at the beginning, had no money when he started. He continued to have no money. He would shoot films for like $50,000 in 4 to 5 days. And because that's the way that he shot his movies, he would talk about that when he first made The Alien Dead, he had this crazy shot list, and he quickly realized that he was never going to be able to do it, so he ripped it up and threw it in the swamp. And ever since then, basically when he constructs a scene I've heard him actually say this, every scene needs only 3 shots, 3 different angles. He used to do only 2 angles on the 2 people talking, but then he decided to throw in a 3rd one to spice things up when things got boring.
Okay.
And you can tell.
So we watched Beverly Hills Vamp.
Oh my God.
Starring Edward Deason.
And when we started the movie, we went, Eddie Deason is probably a pretty big star at this point.
No, I don't recall saying that. This was 10 years after Grease.
He'll probably show up at the beginning. He won't interact with too many people. And then he'll disappear from the film. Nope. This is the Eddie Deason show.
This, like, Eddie Deason is to Jerry Lewis as Ben Turpin is to Charlie Chaplin. He's rigorously one note. I would say after about 20 minutes, I pretty much saw everything in Eddie Deason's arsenal, and it just kept going.
Well, it doesn't really ask much for Eddie Deason either, right? There's a part where
he says everything in this tone of voice.
There's one joke where it's just he falls down some stairs off screen.
I think that was probably added in post, because Fred was like, we gotta add some laughs to this. He's a very unpleasant looking turtle like man.
Eddie Deason.
Yeah, Eddie Deason. And I found his presence just utterly hateful.
And doing some research on this film, it was shot for like 5 days in the same house.
And as I was watching it, I thought, man, when they shot these movies on film, it just legitimized them so much. Because at least this movie, can you imagine if they shot this movie on digital video? It would just look...
Well, there are many Fred Olen Ray films that you can check out.
So Beverly Hills Vamp is about 3 knuckleheads who move to Hollywood in hopes of making a movie, the main one of whom is Eddie Deason. They don't have much luck selling their script, so they decide, let's answer this ad for an escort agency and at least have a little sex out of the deal. So they go...
As one would when you go to Hollywood.
Yeah, it's a Sodom and Gomorrah, basically. Holly Weird, I call it. So they go to this, what they think is a brothel, brothel.
A bordello of blood, if you will.
Yeah, because there are some vampire women there. The coven is...
Are you trying to figure out if it's coven
Yeah,
or coven?
I am, because
Classic American movie.
American movie messed with my brain. The coven, because it rhymes with oven. Yeah. The coven is run by Britt Eklund, because Fred Olen Ray movies are where stars go to die.
I would say that Fred Olen Ray probably actually likes these stars and wants to give them a chance and work with them.
Sure.
But, they also die.
So most of the movie is Eddie Deason being chased around the house by various ghouls, Abbott and Costello style.
But we have to understand that a Fred Olen Ray film, while it is humorous and he is winking at the audience, it is also often bereft of jokes.
Yes.
Like...
Unless you think Eddie Deason making a face over and over again is funny.
He did not make enough faces. The highlight of the film...
No, but he made 3 faces, basically, over and over and over again.
Was the highlight of the film... for me and Will, was a cutaway to Eddie Deason driving a car, stone face.
Yeah. Like Bressonian acting from Eddie Deason.
So, Beverly Hills Vamp, not so good.
And also, I watched his signature film, Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers, which is one joke movie where the joke isn't very good. It's all there in the title. There's a private detective, kind of a Sam Spade type, who's on the trail of this missing woman, and it leads him to this cult that worships an Egyptian god, and they do human sacrifices by chainsaw. And of course, all of them are young lovelies with surgically enhanced busts.
I see a lot of them.
Yeah, and as I was watching it, I was thinking about if I saw this movie when I was 11...
It would be the greatest film of all time.
My mind would have been blown, because when you're 11, you're very fascinated by the idea of naked women, but you don't really want the reality of it. Like,
yeah, you don't want people having sex. Like, when you're 11, you probably don't want to see pornography.
Yeah, like there are like bodily fluids and the way people smell, and like sex is a much more complicated thing than just an airbrushed photo.
But what Hollywood Chainsaw Hooker gives you is just the breasts in a more comedic scenario.
And this is also why an 11-year-old would love it, because you get breasts and also you get this wacky plot with chainsaw hookers and gore. And this is...
gore is strong. You mean blood being sprayed off screen.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
And I think this is my problem with the Fred Olen Ray oeuvre, is that I feel him like digging a bony elbow into my side, saying, this is fun, isn't it? This is what you like. Boobs, blood, and it's just utterly hollow.
Well, I don't really have that much of a problem with, the winking and stuff like that. The problem I have is that it's just the bare minimum you can give. It's in focus. You can kind of follow the story, but it's shot in 4 days, and you can feel those 4 days.
Yeah, it's the bare minimum. Not much happens, and I also feel like there's a certain smugness to these movies. It's like, this is what you want, eh? We're giving you what you want.
Well, there's a funny story behind Hollywood Chainsaw Hooker, because it was actually shot because Fred Olen Ray did a favor for his friend, Gary Graver, who we've talked about before on the podcast.
Love him. We gotta do a whole episode on Gary Graver at some point.
So the deal was, Fred Olen Ray said, I'll rewrite your script, but you gotta give me $5,000, and you gotta let me use your cameras for a number of days. And they said, sure, yeah, whatever. So he went and shot Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers on these days that he could borrow the equipment.
Wow.
Like,
that's inspirational.
It
I like
is.
that.
And that's Fred Olen Ray's story, is that he's never not been like scrapping together a film. Like, he's always been doing that.
I've been rather impressed by Fred Olen Ray's filmography lately, and one reason why, I've been negative about him, but one reason why I kind of like him and I kind of like Jim Wynorski is they're still out there to this day doing their thing.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about Fred Olen Ray before on this podcast, way back when we talked about Steven Seagal.
Fred Olen Ray is a very prolific director for hire these days. He did one of the recent Steven Seagal films, Sniper Special Ops, which I saw, and which
we both watched,
which is bad.
Yes.
Also, Fred Olen Ray, I saw a trailer recently for this like Hallmark Channel Christmas movie he directed with Chevy Chase in it, looking very bloated.
Well, that's the thing, is that Fred Olen Ray is a guy that always wanted to make movies. I've heard him talk about that he wished he could be a studio director. And basically when he started making movies, that didn't really exist anymore. And he never got the opportunity to make the kind of mid-budget horror pictures that he wanted to make.
But the thing is, the horror movies he made independently are bad, and when you look at the great Roger Corman proteges, like when Jonathan Demme made Caged Heat, or when Scorsese made Boxcar Bertha,
yeah, but Fred Olen
they're
Ray
good.
Didn't even have the resources that they did, even though that he did work for Roger Corman making Attack of the 60-Foot Centerfold.
Yeah, but I've seen some Jim Wynorski movies that are kind of good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jim Wynorski has made good movies.
And I mean, you've shown me quotes this week of Fred Olen Ray saying, "Oh yeah, these movies are terrible," or
yeah, he goes like, "I would not watch a disaster movie that I made starring Treat Williams or like an erotic thriller. Those are not the films that I like watching."
And frankly, it comes across. Whereas there were certain Jim Wynorski movies where, Jim Wynorski loves boobs.
Oh, he loves boobs.
He loves action. You know it from his interviews, and I think his movies convey that love.
So Jim Wynorski and Fred Olen Ray are connected at the hip because they work together at the same time, coming up in the industry at the same time. They actually co-directed 2 films together. One of them that's barely a film because they shot in a day. Wow. It's called Scream Queen Hot Tub Party.
That's like when Chaplin and Keaton got together for Limelight.
And they also made a film called Dinosaur Island, which is not good. Yeah. It has a lot of long softcore sex scenes.
Okay.
But Jim Wynorski has a bit of a different career from Fred Olen Ray. Jim Wynorski actually went to film school. He got kicked out. And then he tried to be an assistant. He got fired from being an assistant. So then he accidentally met someone that knew Roger Corman, and he started working for Roger Corman, specifically in the advertising department. He was in charge of the trailers. He was basically the Joe Dante, Alan Arkush after their period, when Roger Corman was more in the weeds in the 90s.
This is one of the things that's like wonderful when you read about Roger Corman's studio, the fact that you could like get in on the ground floor doing trailers or like sweeping the office, and eventually, because you would work for cheap, you'd be able to direct a movie.
Well, Jim Wynorski, what ended up happening was, the famous story goes, there was an Italian exploitation picture called Island of the Fishmen, directed by Sergio Martino. And Jim Wynorski didn't know how he was going to sell this film. So what he ended up doing is he shot some extra footage to put in the trailer that included a busty woman in a lab coat that was attacked by like a fleshy monster. And the poster and the trailer promised, "Screamers, you will see a man turned inside out." And Island of the Fishmen never had any of that in it. When they actually showed the movie in theaters, supposedly the audiences almost rioted. To the point that Roger Corman told Wynorski, "You need to go and shoot footage to insert into the film because you're just lying to them." But that's kind of what Wynorski loved to do, right? Is to like sell all this stuff.
Did you hear that story that Scorsese said where before he shot Boxcar Bertha, Corman said to him, "Now remember, you gotta have a little bit of nudity every 15 minutes.
Well, I mean, with Jim Wynorski, it's like every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because Jim Wynorski was given an opportunity and he got to make Shopping Mall.
Which I think is quite good.
It is.
I was
a lot of
pleasantly
fun.
Surprised by it. It's 75 minutes long.
Oh,
which is
perfect
great.
time, yeah.
Not a wasted second. A lot of fun action scenes. Some pretty good comedy.
A little bit of gore.
A little bit of gore.
Bunch of cameos.
It has some. I hesitate to call it social satire, but it has some stuff in there that kind of anticipates RoboCop, I think. The plot is that a shopping mall has introduced a new security system, which are these 2 robots, which will kill
yeah, I mean, they're not supposed to, but they installed lasers and their heads explode on them.
Yeah, and the first people who think there's something wrong are cameo performers Paul Bartel and
Mary Warnoff, playing the characters from Eating Raoul.
And also, Dick Miller is in there as Walter Paisley.
That's right. His character from A Bucket of Blood.
I saw in the credits the Mel Wells from Little Shop of Horrors.
I didn't spot him, did you?
No, I didn't, but he apparently played like the chef or something.
Huh.
Yeah.
Oh, because at one point they're at a pizzeria. And what ends up happening in the film is that a bunch of teenagers get trapped after hours and then chased by robots. The thing that I noticed this time watching it is that Jim Wynorski actually tries to do some cool stuff at some point. There's one scene where all the teens are having sex and the camera tracks across all of them in one long shot to introduce all of them.
I couldn't tell if he was like doing something oblique where it's like these are different rooms of the house, but no, actually it's...
Well, on the commentary he says he only did that because he ran out of time and had to do the coverage very fast.
Well, necessity is the mother of invention. It's like when Orson Welles was making Othello and he had to turn one scene into a bathhouse scene because they had no costumes.
Well, and the thing about Jim Wynorski that separates him from Fred Olen Ray is that Wynorski films move. Like, they often move very quickly. Fred Olen Ray films kind of just sit there.
I also watched Return of Swamp Thing, which is probably his biggest budget movie, right? It's a franchise movie. And so Louis Jourdan is back. This is about Swamp Thing. Honestly, it doesn't really even have a plot. It's like
Swamp Thing fights some monsters.
Louis Jourdan is back, and he's got this Dr. Moreau-like lab, and Heather Locklear, a young Heather Locklear, is in there as Swamp Thing's love interest. And one thing I liked about it was that basically Swamp Thing carries himself like he's Roger Moore in this movie.
Like, the Swamp Thing in the original film is more of a monster and played for horrific effect. In this one, he's like, oh, how's it going, everyone?
So that was kind of fun. I didn't like how much time the movie wasted on two comical kids.
Yeah.
And just in general, I don't know.
It's okay. It's fine.
It's fine.
But, like, the best Jim Wynorski films, Chopping Mall, Deathstalker 2, are movies that move very quickly and kind of reflect their inspirations. Like, Deathstalker 2 was a sequel to that Conan ripoff, Deathstalker. But its real inspiration are, like, the kind of swashbuckling Errol Flynn pictures or serials where, like, you could split the movie in 10-minute chunks and it would still make sense because it's episodic like that.
Now, one movie that I revisited this week that I really like is called POPATOPOLIS. That's POPATOPOLIS. It's a documentary about Jim Wynorski as he's making The Witches of Brestwick, and the big challenge of the movie is he has to shoot this movie in 3 days.
Yes.
So the movie follows him as he's making it, and it's just a wonderful, like, candid look at the making of a low-budget exploitation film.
A film that you would just kind of toss off the shelf and go, well, this is bad. And it is. It is bad.
Yeah.
But the complexities that go into making it and the emotional exercises that he has to play with his actors who are like, this is terrible. Or there's this one scene where they're trying to do a line of dialogue, and Jim Wynorski keeps interrupting one of the actresses because she keeps getting one word wrong.
And it just goes over and over and over and over again. It's an interesting movie because it captures the exploitation film industry at a crossroads, because the internet has just come in, digital filmmaking is on the upswing, the market for direct-to-video exploitation movies is bottoming out, and so you need to make more and more movies for less and less money. And there's this general sense, like, one of the actresses is Julie Smith, I think her name is, who was in a lot of Wynorski films, and she talks about how it's just not fun anymore. There's no time to do any acting.
3 days is insane to shoot a film with. In the film even climaxes with Jim Wynorski going, I was going to shoot this in 2.
Yeah. So the movie, on the one hand, it's kind of fun and exciting because you get to see Jim Wynorski in the act of creation.
And he is a director who is very high stress. Yeah. He screams a lot.
Yeah.
Fred Olen Ray said that when they were shooting Dinosaur Island, he's a guy who keeps his cool all the time. Like, he doesn't really jump off the handle because it's just a job. But Jim Wynorski is a guy that's like, like, he's screaming, like, what the fuck is going on? Why isn't this working?
But you get a sense of Jim Wynorski as a guy who loves making movies.
Yeah.
And, you know, Roger Corman is interviewed in the film, and he says that he always thought Wynorski could have moved up to bigger and better movies, but for some reason he didn't. And I think somebody else says that it's because he likes to make the movie quickly. He doesn't want to live in a movie for a year. He wants to have the quick satisfaction of one movie and then another movie and then another movie. And so there's the bittersweet quality is that his career has peaked. Once you've made Return to Swamp Thing, which is your most luxurious film, and then you're reduced to making
Witches of Brestwick
in 3 days, like, it's not going back up.
Yeah.
There's a melancholy quality to that.
He's never going to have the glory days that they had in the 90s, which I'm sure at the time they were going, we're just going to fight through this. These are like the trenches, and then we're going to move up to the big time.
And then we find out at the end of the movie that Julie Smith, like, retired the next week because it was just too depressing.
But Jim Wynorski and Fred Olen Ray just kept on trucking. I mean...
And that's great. I'm glad they're out there. I'm glad they're doing their thing.
The reason that I like that they're doing their thing, and we've kind of alluded to this, is that they are big movie fans. Like, Jim Wynorski films, especially the early ones, are littered with references. Jim Wynorski's first film was a picture called The Lost Empire, which he made completely independently. And when he talks about the film, he talks about it in such reverent tones, because he put his everything in it. There's ninjas, a lot of women with large breasts. It's a plot of Enter the Dragon, where it's like a fighting tournament on an island. There's a guy in a gorilla suit. And you just hear him talk about this movie, which he was obviously very passionate about. And you can see, like, that love is something that I'm just attracted to. At one point in the commentary track, he talks about how he got an old Lassie actor in the film, and when that actor appears on screen, you can hear the sound from the original Lassie TV show, the dog barking in the background, just as a wink and a nudge to fans that they will never get. Because, come on.
I think both directors have cast Dick Miller as Walter Paisley
That's
in their
right.
films. Wynorski made a remake of Roger Corman's Not of This Earth with Tracy Lords, which is a terrible film.
And Wynorski started a bunch of his films with Miracle Pictures, which is a joke from the Joe Dante Alan Arkush film Hollywood Boulevard, where the company in that film is called Miracle Pictures, and their tagline is, if it's good, it's a miracle.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Frello Ray called his company American Independent Pictures.
Because the other company was American International, the one that Corman worked for.
And, like, if you just need to look at, like, where their fandom comes from, Frello Ray wrote a book on independent filmmakers called The New Poverty Row, where he goes company by company and breaks down the exact money they spent on the movie, days, advertising, all that stuff, including his own work.
All right, I have a question for you. Does your increased appreciation for them come from the fact that you're now finishing your second film?
No, I don't think so.
Really, you don't see any kinship with them as like these independent directors, putting together exploitation movies on the fly?
I wish I could be more like them in that sense, but I've never been in their world, right? Where it's like a for money world. Like this movie that I'm working on has taken me like a year and a half to finish. That would be unfathomable for Fred Olen Ray and Jim Wynorski.
You're more of an Orson Welles.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, Fred Olen Ray, right at the beginning of his career, he ended up with his son that he had to take care of while he was making movies. So the monster in the film Biohazard is played by his actual son, Christopher Ray, which is insane. And Christopher Ray actually went on to be a director himself, making such magnum opuses as Two-Headed Shark Attack.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before we wrap this up, I'm reminded of you and I, a long time ago, listened to this great commentary track on a movie that Fred Olen Ray produced called Jacko,
the most famous commentary track of all time.
It's probably not true, but it's
infamous.
Yeah, because basically the guy who directed Jacko,
Steve Latchaw,
which is kind of like a serial. It's like a Halloween ripoff where the villain has like a pumpkin for a head, and it has some stock footage of John Carradine thrown in, kind of like Bela Lugosi in Plan 9. But Steve, what's his name, takes this movie so seriously, and at every stage he's talking about all the serious decisions he made, and basically Fred Olen Ray is doing kind of a mystery science theater on it.
And Steve Latchaw is having none of it. And it's boiling, and it's like one dig here, one dig there.
And then eventually Steve walks out of the commentary.
Yeah, because Fred Olen Ray makes a dig about Steve Latchaw's son.
Yeah.
About the fact that he has a prison record.
You don't go after someone's family.
And he's like, fuck you. And
then he comes back. He says, I'm not going to let you ruin my commentary.
Hey, I thought we were friends. I don't think I'd ever consider us friends. More like acquaintances.
And then it ends with him saying, fuck you, Fred.
Yeah, that's right. But the weird thing about that is that Fred Olen Ray and Steve Latchaw have done multiple commentaries after that.
It's a Klaus Kinski, Werner Herzog type relationship.
But I should let people go not thinking that, man, these guys sound terrible, but actually point them in directions that these artists have done stuff that I like. Fred Olen Ray, in the book New Poverty Row, talks about one film that he actually enjoyed making and that he was proud of. Most of the other films, he's like, ugh, they're terrible. I had so many restrictions. And that film is called Haunting Fear. It's a adaptation of The Premature Burial by Edgar Allan Poe, but it's basically Fred Olen Ray's Repulsion, where it's one girl going crazy for 90 minutes. And that's something we didn't point out either, is that a lot of the reason that Fred Olen Ray's films feel airless is that they need to be 84 minutes. And that when you shoot things for 4 days, they usually end up 60 minutes, and you got to pad it out.
Yeah.
And you feel that padding.
Well, at least one of the movies we saw, maybe two of them, start with some intro of an old guy sitting in a chair explaining the story we're going to see. And it's such transparent padding.
Yeah, it is. And Fred Olen Ray has his own DVD releasing company called Retro Media, where he releases classic exploitation films, and he does new scans of them, does commentary, special features. He genuinely cares about these films.
And that's great. I love that.
And, you were mentioning that Jim Wynorski's kind of given up on the dream, he's never going to be what he used to be. But he did get a chance to make a remake of, is it Gila? No, Gila? I can never say
The
it.
giant Gila monster?
Yeah, he remade the giant Gila monster in 2012, and he actually had the star of the original 60s picture in his movie.
Oh, wow. I gotta check that out. Okay.
And it even has like the same theremin score as the original film.
Oh, nice.
So, it's that love is still there. It just has difficulty expressing itself in the kind of economic situations that they find themselves in.
But I mean, one of the things about POPATOPOLIS is they kind of try to inspire the audience to feel sad that this era of like kind of low but still respectably budgeted exploitation movies,
respectably budgeted,
like direct-to-video exploitation movies of the 80s is vanishing. And part of me watches that and thinks, okay, so we don't get movies like Beverly Hills Vamp anymore. Like, big deal. Who cares?
Wow. You're going to end it with a swipe like that at the end instead of a...
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
But they seem like nice guys.
Fred Olen Ray, Jim Wynorski, you have a place in my heart. All right. So we do have one letter this week, and it's from Ray Hammonds. And he goes, "Hey, guys. Just wanted to say I'm a fairly recently discoverer of the podcast, but really dig it. I'm a tireless cinephile, routinely logging 500 to 700 films a year. Whoa, man. And really enjoying listening to film-related podcasts while commuting, doing household chores, etc. The majority of podcasts have kind of focus on that week's biggest general release with some occasional deep dives, but what I really enjoy about your show is an enthusiasm and commitment to exploring a wide range of cinema from different eras, countries of origin, etc. It's refreshing and inspiring, and it hits me right in my cinephile sweet spot." I'm sorry I'm reading this so fast, but it's a long letter.
We like to hit you right in the sweet spot, you know?
I'll toss out some ideas for potential episodes. My favorite filmmakers are very diverse and generate strong opinions, so I'm a bit nervous nominating them. I'm referring to Terrence Malick and Spike Lee. There's definitely plenty to discuss there, but for now, let me suggest something more off the beaten path. An episode on slow cinema, or contemporary contemplative cinema. I've provided some helpful links below. Oh, thank you. Filmmakers like Bela Tarr, Lissandro Alonso, Carl Dreyer, James Benning, Pedro Costa, and then he names a whole bunch more. And my second suggestion, an episode on movie lists, their pros and cons, with central focus on the website They Shoot Pictures, Don't They? And their 2 annually updated super lists, the greatest 1,000 films and 21st century's most acclaimed films list. P.S. Thanks for doing episodes on Kelly Reichardt and Charles Burnett.
Well, I'm sure we'll do Terrence Malick and Spike Lee at some point.
The reason we haven't done Spike Lee is, like, we have to do an African-American director. He's the first one that everybody goes to.
Yeah.
So we want to kind of do more off the beaten path.
Yeah, but we'll get to him.
Yeah, and as far as slow cinema, that has been requested before.
Should we... Like, I would actually be kind of more interested in doing some of those filmmakers.
Yes, individually.
But, I mean, it's an interesting trend. In fact, we might get to one next week.
Oh, we may! Anyway, thanks for your letter.
But let's talk about film lists. What do you think of film lists?
I don't like ranking lists. I like the idea of film lists, but at the same time, I will look at lists to get inspiration from what movies I should watch.
Sometimes I look at people, they'll rank their lists of, here are my 100 favorite movies in order, and it's like... How do you determine the difference between 56 and 57?
Yeah, I don't know. But that's what people love. Like, you've written for websites. It's all about lists. It's the idea that you're getting that information in a concise fashion that can be absorbed.
A top 10 list I get.
Yes.
And top 10 lists are fun. On my Twitter this week, a lot of people were posting their, like, top 10 comedies of all time, because I guess the BBC was doing a poll, and I was, like, trying to think of what mine would be. And the problem is I actually think it's harder to do a list of the best comedies than is the best movies of all time, because best movies of all time, that's, like, super exclusive. It's just a given that most things are left off. But with the comedy list, I found myself thinking, like, oh, well, I gotta have a Keaton on. I gotta have a Three Stooges on.
Do you remember when the AFI did that big special about the top 100 comedies of all time?
I watched it with great interest.
And number 1 was Some Like It Hot.
I remember thinking. I mean, it's an all right movie.
Not a fan.
Well, number 2 is Tootsie, which is like totally ridiculous. I remember being. Well, I mean, I don't know. That list, if you look at it now, is pretty bad, because there were a lot of movies that were sort of like in memory at the time, like City Slickers is on that list. Has anybody watched that since?
No, I'm a bigger fan of City Slickers 2, The Search for Curly's Gold.
But, I mean, a comedy list, I think, would attract a lot more movies that like were made in the last 10 years, just because people remember laughing so hard at them.
Yeah, lists are weird, right? They mostly exist to make people angry.
Well, and also just as, like, performative to show, look at what my taste is.
Exactly. Like, I want to validate myself with my taste.
But I mean, I don't think that's so bad. I think it's kind of fun to look at people's top 10 lists. I remember when the Sight and Sound list came out last time. I enjoyed looking at everybody's.
Yeah, that's fun, because I usually look at filmmakers that I like what are their favorite films.
And that's interesting.
Because you want to see what inspired them, right?
Yeah. It was weird that Michael Mann put Avatar on his list.
Michael Mann doesn't get a chance to go out to the movies very often.
Yeah.
And, he is in love with technology and stuff like that. Yeah. At the same time, me and Will have actually messaged each other we did episodes that have the best of such and such in the title, and that's the one that gets the most clicks.
It's true. We've actually been thinking about doing a top 10 movies of all time episode.
Do you think that would there's nowhere to go from there after you've given those top 10 movies of all time?
No, I don't think that. I think that
but at the same time, it's I'm not going to shock anybody with my top 10 movies of all time. You're not going to shock anybody either.
No.
Yeah, unless we make our contrarian.
Is that what
list.
It should be about, shocking people?
I think that's what people want from lists. I think they want to be surprised and they want to see things that they haven't heard of.
Okay, but I think a list, more than anything, it's just to see what a person's taste is, and that's what our lists would communicate. What our tastes are.
Yeah, exactly.
Our list wouldn't.
I can't put all of Bellatar's film on my top 10 list, so I'll have to shave it down.
Yeah, I mean, when I go on Letterboxd and I see that somebody has Fight Club, Pulp Fiction, American Beauty,
and they just followed you
as the favorite. Well, no. I love my fans.
All right, so next week we're going to be talking about Chantal Akerman.
And I gotta tell you, it's going to be a real breath of fresh air after this week.
Really? Because I was after I watched all these movies, I was like, can I do something easy this time?
We could just change it.
No, Chantal Akerman, That's what we said. She's been on the periphery for, it feels like a year now, where we're we should do Chantal Akerman. But it's finally time. I've never seen one of her films.
Not even Jean Dielman?
Nope.
Okay. I don't know if you're going to like it.
I know what Jean Dielman is.
I think it's a great film. I think it's one of the best movies ever made. It's also, that and No Home Movie are the only two of her films I've seen.
So, I know what Jean Dielman is. It's about 3.5 hours of a woman going through her daily chores from a locked camera position.
But if you're going to watch
I need to watch it. I need to sit down.
Trap yourself in the room, because it has a cumulative power.
Exactly. I can't be checking my phone, looking up to see something different.
You have to embrace the boredom. The boredom is part of it.
Did you watch the movie in the theater?
I did.
Okay.
And it was one of the best movie experiences I've ever had. But we'll talk more about that next week.
Yeah.
I think I'll also take a look at News from Home and Je tu Hillel.
You know what? I lied. I have seen a Chantal Akerman movie.
You've seen?
I've seen Golden 80s.
Okay.
The musical she did that takes place in a shopping mall.
Have you seen A Couch in New York?
No, I have not. So that's what we're going to be doing next week. If you're fans of this podcast, you need to get the Patreon subscription.
We've got a doozy for you this week.
So we recorded...
The Chantal Akerman of New Jersey.
Kevin Smith.
Yeah.
We did an episode where we watched Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. But me and Will knew better, that we were just going to talk for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
You get a whole new episode this week. For $5, you can listen to it, and all the episodes we've previously done, and you get all the future ones as well that come up. One every week, exclusive to Patreon.
And we've had some letters asking, for Kevin Smith. So here's your Kevin Smith.
You just have to pay for it.
Yeah. If you really love us, you'll
That's
pay
right,
for it.
yeah. And you can send us letters at Loose Cannons Podcast.
No, not Loose Cannons Podcast, you bastard, you two-timing.
You can send us
And now you're going to yell somebody else's name during sex later.
As opposed to Will Sloan.
Yeah. That's the kind of gay panic jokes that we heard a lot of in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back this week.
That's right. That was a little taste.
Yeah.
So you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. Rate and review us on iTunes. I begged you guys to do it last week and nobody did.
Yeah, what the hell? We want to get in new and notable next to Tiff Long Take or wherever the other ones are.
All right. Until then, my name's Justin Nicolou.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening.
So one director that we didn't talk about this week that's very much in the same class, the same generation, the same milieu of Jim Wynorski and Fred Olen Ray is David DeCoteau.
Mm-hmm. I believe we've talked about him previously in the podcast, right? Because we had a face-to-face interaction with him at a convention.
We met him at the, God, what the hell was it
Horrorama.
called? That's right. And also, I wrote a profile of Mr. DeCoteau.
Because if you don't know, he directed a cult classic film, which is...
A Talking Cat?
Starring Eric Roberts' voice from a bathroom.
So that article that I wrote was for Flavor Wire about 2 or 3 years ago.
Did it go viral?
I don't know if it went viral, but it's
David DeCoteau knew about it.
Well, when we met DeCoteau, I was just going to get my Talking Cat DVD autographed, and you said, "Wait, didn't you talk to DeCoteau?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I did that Flavor Wire article." And DeCoteau gave me this look that was like, "Oh man, everyone's read that article." Which I didn't know if he was happy about that. He said it got so much traction on the movie. I really appreciated that. Oh, I don't remember that. I remember just being like shocked and scared and worried he wouldn't like me.
And we talked with DeCoteau for like 30 minutes.
Yeah, I really like him as a guy, yeah.
But he is also a filmmaker, and other than A Talking Cat, which is his later picture, like Furlough and Rain, Jim Wynorski, he started like kind of at the bottom of the barrel. He actually started working on films like Escape from New York. He was the craft service person on that movie.
And his earlier directorial efforts were porn.
Yes,
yeah,
they were. Which is interesting because he is a gay man, and he was making straight porn. And when he would later go on in his early career, making films like Dreamniac,
Sorority Babes at the Slimeball Bolorama,
Creepazoids,
Beach Babes from Beyond. What a cast that movie has. It has Don Swayze, Frank Stallone, several other celebrity brothers.
Yeah, just like a million celebrity
and
siblings.
Also Burt Ward.
Oh man. And we talked about Furlough and Ray and Jim Wynorski as kind of bottom of the barrel. David DeCoteau, even in his early career, was like, let's do the like basics thing to get a movie.
Yeah. So David DeCoteau did make a movie. So he did a lot of movies with Charles Band, Full Moon Productions.
His best film is Puppet Master 3, The Revenge of Toulon. It's very, very good. It was written by a guy named C. Courtney Joyner, who's a big movie fan like him, so it has that feel.
I also know that Retro Puppet Master is an early starring role for Greg Sestero from The Room. And in fact, I believe David is even in The Disaster Artist.
That's
himself.
Right, yeah.
But he did make a movie in the mid-90s called Leather Jacket Love Story, which is kind of his attempt to enter the kind of new queer cinema that was happening at the time. Kind of a Bruce LaBruce style movie.
I've never seen it.
Well, it's interesting because I think it's his only movie to lose money. So it's kind of like what The Intruder was for Roger Corman.
Yeah, and while Fred and Jim went on to make like Hallmark movies and other stuff like that, David just kind of threw that away, and he started his own company, Rapid Heart Pictures, and he just makes his own movies.
But what's interesting is Roger Corman has talked about how so after I made this artistic film, The Intruder, I realized I had to smuggle my political commentary into exploitation films. Sometime around the turn of the millennium, David DeCoteau's movies got a lot queerer.
Yes.
And in his interview with me, I thought it was kind of interesting. He said that he positioned these movies as being for women. Because the way they sort of objectified the male body. But I'm sorry, if you watch any of them, they are for gay men.
I mean, they go through the sub-genre of tighty-whitey films.
Yes.
Because they're famous for very cut young men wearing nothing but underwear.
There are a lot of cut young men, and also even a movie like A Talking Cat has this young kid who's kind of a twink. And anybody who would watch the movie would recognize, oh, this is a twink.
What I find fascinating about David DeCoteau is that his films are like as low budget as you can get, shot in 2 days in some dude's mansion in LA, with sometimes barely competent filmmaking around them. Like, David DeCoteau is, I've described him as a kind of Jess Franco-like figure right now, in the fact that by the time the film is done, it feels like he's pretty much done with it, and it's about shooting the next one. That's what he's passionate about, is the filmmaking process.
And also, like Jess Franco, his movies are like free associative filmmaking, so a lot of his own preoccupations and fetishes make their way into the movie just because it's coming right out of him at that moment. He had this whole series of movies that were on Netflix for a long time called 1313. They had that title because numerical titles showed up first in VOD
That's
listings.
Right.
And the 1313 movies were basically about hot dudes in tighty whities in a mansion, but a lot of them would also feature old faded scream queens.
He loves his cinema history. Just like Furlough and Ray and Jim, like David DeCoteau loves bringing these like washed up actors and just giving them a chance to appear on camera again.
As he told me, I asked about Christine DeBelle, who's in A Talking Cat and probably half dozen other of his films. Christine DeBelle was in Meatballs, The Big Brawl with Jackie Chan, the adult version of Alice in Wonderland. And she then retired for about 20 years to raise her kids. And she sent him a resume because she was thinking, oh, maybe I'll get back into acting. And he called her up and was like, wait, are you Christine DeBelle? You're amazing. You're a star. And she was like, you know who I am?
Yeah.
And now she's in a half dozen of his movies.
Because it's almost no commitment. You show up for one day and shoot in like a house with almost no lights, and you just kind of goof off.
And, you know, you hear him talk about some of these people, like he's worked with Tom Berenger, or the guy in A Talking Cat was this child star from the 60s who I can't even remember his name, but, you know, just somebody that David DeCoteau grew up loving. It's kind of like how Bela Lugosi and Ed Wood idolized Bela Lugosi.
Yeah. And like David DeCoteau made a movie, I don't remember the exact title, it's called like Santa's Summer House, I think, that he cast all of these action stars from the 90s, like Cynthia Rothrock, Gary Daniels, all these action stars to do no action and just do comedy.
Okay, that's what's weird about his movies. His movies are constantly confounding your expectations because he'll make these movies that have a bunch of hot dudes in tighty whities, but they'll also have these faded scream queens who like aren't in their underwear, but when you see the DVD box, it's like they're all posing really seductively.
Yep, that's right.
And it's like, wait, which audience is this for?
I don't think David DeCoteau thinks of that. I think that he's said that he just loves waking up in the morning and going, I want to make a movie I can start shooting this afternoon.
Yeah.
Like money changes hands directly from his to the actors.
Well, you've heard the story about him getting Eric Roberts to be the voice of the talking cat. He called up the Roberts household and was like, hey, want to be the voice of a cat in my cat movie? So sure, come on over.
It wasn't Roberts that said that. It was his wife who went, yep, come on over, because Eric Roberts does not know who David DeCoteau is.
Well, because Eric Roberts has been in 10 of his movies at least, and as he told us when we met him, he was like, yeah, last time I saw him he recognized me.
Yeah, but he didn't know my name and he still calls me Chief.
Yeah.
He's like, hey Chief, where do you need me?
So he went over, and DeCoteau had forgot like his proper recording equipment, so he basically just had like the camera like the built-in audio on his camera,
and he held it up to Eric Roberts' mouth, which is why the talking cat sounds like he's coming from a bathroom.
Yeah.
It's like echoey, sad reading.
Yeah.
And I think there's something kind of great about that DeCoteau could just go out and make those movies. Like, we're not forced to watch them, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, DeCoteau can do these million commentary tracks on like classic exploitation films, which are amazing.
Yeah.
Like he does some with, is it David?
Ted Newsom.
Yeah.
On some of the Ed Wood movies.
And they're great because he knows his stuff. He's a great talker. And, you know, I've heard him talk about, like, on a commentary he does with Charles Band, on Charles Band's first movie, Crash. And he's like, I love this movie. I loved it so much that I remade it in the early 2000s.
But for me, DeCoteau only becomes a really interesting filmmaker like in the last 5 years, frankly. Like Beach Babes and Beyond, Sorority Babes at the Slimeball Bolorama.
Yeah, it's like low-tier kind of Empire Full Moon pictures.
Yeah, but it's in the last 5 or 6
Video.
years that he has developed a style that is entirely his own. And it's like somewhere in that kind of affectless digital sheen is something that's intoxicating to me.
It'll be interesting to see his films be kind of picked up later on once they've, you know, he either retires or he slows down a little bit.
Yeah.
And those gems are picked out in the same way that like people obsess over Jess Franco.
Yeah, like Jess Franco has like 1 in every 10 movies is amazing.
Yeah, and you know what? I bet that David DeCoteau stuff happens as well, but there's no way to know unless we watch them all now. And I don't think I can do that.